Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Retirement Planning in a Shifting Economy. My name is Radhia, and I lead marketing here at the Canadian Securities Institute. Before we begin, excuse me, we'd like to take a moment to share a few important notes with the audience. The ratings, financial analysis, projections, and other observations constituting part of the information contained herein are and must be construed solely as statements of opinion and not statements of fact or recommendations to purchase, sell, or hold any securities. We strongly recommend you speak with excuse me, a qualified financial advisor regarding your own unique circumstances. And we ask that no one record this webinar without Moody's explicit written permission and remind you that no one has permission to quote any of the comments made or questions asked by the webinar audience. Today's webinar will also be recorded. All members of the audience, excuse me, all members of the audience are currently on mute. If you have a question, we encourage you to type it in the Q&A box, and we ask that you please keep your questions general and avoid sharing any personal or client-specific information. Let's get started into the webinar. Excuse me. Joining us today are Dr. Christina Sendova, Associate Professor and Chair of Statistical and Actuarial Science at Western University, Robert Ann, Associate Vice President of Wealth Planning and Tax Consulting at Raymond James, and Neela White, Senior Portfolio Manager, excuse me, at Raymond James. Today's discussion will focus on how advisors can deliver greater value to their clients by sharpening their retirement planning approach. Combining the latest research with practical advisory experience, our speakers will dive into key topics, including the demographic trends, reshaping retirement risk, the power of actuarial modeling to enhance income strategies, and ways to bridge academic research with real-world applications. You'll also gain actionable strategies to optimize after-tax income, manage risk rising healthcare and long-term care costs, and equip your clients to confidently plan for the future. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here for an important conversation. So let's get started. We'll jump in by starting with how research-based insights can help advisors create resilient, evidence-based retirement strategies. Christina, can you expand on this a bit more for us?
Thank you, Radhia. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I will start by sharing some data from Stats Canada about retirement preparedness of Canadians. So between Canadians aged 55 and 64, their median net worth is 735,000 for men and 520,000 for women. 2/3 of Canadians in this group still hold debt. And it is noteworthy that their wealth is also tied to their housing. Once Canadians reach 65 years of age, their net worth drops to 368.6 thousand for men and 250,500 for women. This is their net worth, now not including housing and cars and other such property that cannot be easily converted into retirement income. So today I want to touch on a few questions that I'm hoping will help you advise your clients. So among Canadians with retirement savings, we are wondering how much risk they are taking, how quickly their savings will be depleted, will they outlive their funds, or could they have some, would they run out of funding during their retirement? And lastly, what investment strategies would be best suited for securing their financial security? Next slide, please. So the research that I'm presenting today is based on a study that started, that has data from July 2019 to September 2020. This is a 3-year period that we have data. It's a very special period. Some of the time is just before the pandemic, there is the pandemic, and the last months are after the pandemic. This data is provided to the Financial Wellness Lab at the Western University from a registered investment provider. We have studied 4,500 clients. They had with our provider about 12,700 accounts, and the investment securities they had as options were about 14,500. So initially, when clients become associated with this investment provider, their advisor, they are using an advisor, and they choose a risk tolerance level that they feel comfortable with. We looked at clients that are self-declared retired. They could be 65 years or even younger. Some of them are still holding RRSPs. Others have RRIF accounts or TFSA accounts. So we used a statistical clustering algorithm to see how their self-declared risk tolerance would compare to how their assets were performing. And we found that instead of the 5 risk tolerance levels that they would normally declare one of, actually there are 4 risk tolerance levels: low to medium, medium, and high. And the majority of clients, both male and female, choose the medium risk tolerance level. And we later found that that was actually a very good decision. Still, even in retirement, there were clients who choose high risk tolerance. And in this table, you see how the risk tolerance is consistently linked to their age. So average age for the highest risk tolerance is 74 for male and 73 for female, but it is going up, and which demonstrates that while their initial wealth, this is the wealth that they had with this investment provider at the beginning of the study period, is gradually reducing while their age is advancing, which makes perfect sense. Next slide, please. So here I want to show you a few graphs. With blue color, we are using to indicate male clients, and red color is for female clients. On the x-axis everywhere in these graphs, we have the age of the clients, starting from age of 65 to about 85 years of age. So first we examined the wealth they had at the start of our study. So you can see that basically for male clients, they range between 300,000 and below 600,000 over the time. And for female clients, the levels of wealth are similar. And the difference are mainly in the risk tolerance that they have declared. Next thing that we wanted to see, and these 2 graphs here are showing that we wanted to find out how our clients will do within their lifetime, whether they will run out of funds or maybe they have some funds remaining for their bequest. So on these two graphs, you see again age, and now on the y-axis, there is the remaining lifetime for clients. The bright green line is the median life expectancy. So for example, some male Canadian age 65 is expected on average to live 20 more years. And for Canadian who lived until 85, they are expected to live under 10 more years. And the dark green line is what is the ultimate age here. It is 110 years. So ideally, we would like our clients to be between the two green lines, which means that they'll have enough funds for their remaining life expectancy, but at the same time, they won't leave too much for their bequest, meaning that they will take full advantage of their retirement savings. So for the graph of male clients, here we see that only the highest risk tolerance are within these lines, but very curiously, the other three risk tolerances levels are basically clients will have funds remaining after passing. And for female clients, this trend is even more pronounced. So in a way, that sounds very optimistic. But when we go to the next graphs, where again we have age on the x-axis, but on the y-axis we have their annual income, and this is a pre-tax income. This is just what they are withdrawing from their retirement savings. We see that for most clients, basically their annual income is below $15,000 for male, and only the highest risk tolerance group has about $20,000 annually. While for female clients, this is somewhere between $7,000 and $12,000 per year. As you can see, with the amounts that these clients have initially at the beginning of the study period, which is above the levels of what median Canadian has, according to Statistics Canada, basically their annual income is on the lower end. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Christina. Those are really interesting insights. Given the withdrawal patterns that you're mentioning, how can financial advisors guide clients to preserve their retirement savings?
Yeah. Thank you, Radia, for this question. Here, basically, we first want to figure out, again, what proportion of their savings retirees are spending annually. And as you can see from this table and the visual underneath, basically they spend quite a bit more than the usual 4% rule. But still only the male clients who have the highest risk tolerance and the female clients with the lowest risk tolerance withdraw more aggressively, while most clients have between $7,000 and $12,000 annually. But the associated risk that we found of them running out of funds during their retirement is for male clients between 10 and 30%, which is rather concerning. With respect to main takeaways that we had from this study, next slide, please. I would like to share that it is very important for advisors to establish appropriate risk tolerance level with their clients. We found that those who are in the lowest risk tolerance level, their returns were very low, and in some cases weren't even able to compensate for inflation after we take account of some fees that they needed to pay for their investments. And also in another data set that we studied, we found that clients who are trading themselves, those who are not using advisors, they run a very high risk of losing their capital. So, so far in our studies, we found that clients who are advised by financial advisors do best with their portfolios. It is also important for advisors to help their clients rebalance portfolios on a regular basis. And when I say regular basis, 1 year is the minimum, while if the rebalancing happens as frequently as monthly, that is too often. Another common pitfall that clients are experiencing is that they might panic when the economy is not doing well, when there are market crashes and high volatility situation on the market. Some panic and they withdraw funds, which is really very detrimental for their portfolios. So it would be tremendously helpful if advisors can prevent this from happening. And keep in mind that dips in the market performance usually last for about 12 days. So once these 12 days are over, most frequently portfolios are already up to their previous levels. So basically knowing 12 days is the usual time might help keep clients calmer. Another takeaway that we found is that reinvesting returns or other deposits that clients might have on a regular basis is very important, rather than leaving returns in some cash accounts, waiting for a larger amount to be accumulated and then to be invested. It is better to reinvest on a regular basis, because this strategy takes advantage of the market fluctuations. So we are not running the risk of buying high when we have a larger amount of returns accumulated.
Thanks, Christina. I think we can jump to the next slide. To complement those research and insights, Neela, how can we better understand the way real-world client considerations and health factors are impacting retirement planning? You're muted still.
Sorry about that. I should know better than that. Thank you, Radhya, and thank you, Dr. Sindova. So when I look at, from this side of the desk, when I look at the implications of clients and how they're spending money, especially when we look at considerations later in life, when we look at statistically right across Canada through various surveys, 96% of seniors 65 and over. They actually want to age in place, so the age in home. But many of them, and most of them, about 88% actually feel that that's actually unattainable. So here's a dichotomy between what you want, but doing no planning to actually make it possible. With healthcare as well, there's a limited awareness of what the actual in-home cost is going to be as far as support goes, if you have complex support needs. And part of that is the insufficient planning for healthcare needs. When we think about when planning should start with the idea of aging in place, you know, you have to look at what's it going to cost for home renovations? What would a chairlift cost? What would a stair lift cost? What would an elevator cost? What would a ramp cost? Handrails. So from the most basic of home modifications to the most complex, if indeed aging in place is the end goal. And again, when we talk about what does the retirement portfolio look like, that has to be part of the budget and consideration when we talk about aging in place, and possibly long-term care. And again, when we look at in-home care costs, right now the minimum is between $20 and $70 an hour. The usual is about $30 an hour to $70, and 70 is when you're dealing with a much more complex health issue, such as wound care, and you need an actual nurse to come in and provide care as opposed to a personal support worker to provide bodily care. And usually it tends to be at about 2 to 3 hour minimums as far as the shift goes. So when we're looking at financial planning and retirement planning, if you think, okay, we're going to need a minimum of 2 to 3 hours a day, let's call that at $30 an hour with tax, let's call it $100. What does $36,500 look like in that retirement plan? And what has to be modified on the front end, possibly, as you're approaching retirement, to allow for the health fund to be developed in the plan? Next slide, please. So quickly, I just want to go over what the difference is between retirement homes and long-term care homes. And part of the reason why I feel that's very important is we're seeing these terms used quite broadly as a huge spectrum that means all the same thing. And it definitely does not, from both a model perspective and a cost perspective. So when we look at a retirement home is based on a social model. It tends to be for more well elderly people, though we're seeing a shift in that right now with retirement homes stepping up and covering the gaps of long-term care homes and making profitable decisions based on that. So they are privately owned and operated. There is no government application necessary. You just apply directly to the home that you want to have access to. And it's based on the availability, the personal preferences, and behavioral issues. The cost and funding. Since it's not funded by the government, it is private pay. The cost of a retirement home for a private room runs between around $4,000, $4,500, and that's for a basic studio usually. And again, it depends on where you are and what province you're in. And it can run anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 a month, depending on what type of care you need. So if you're looking at something like your client has cognitive decline, and let's call it Alzheimer's for the sake of dementia, and that's the most common one that we're hearing about, obviously, with our clients right now. Those costs tend to be between $10,500 to $15,000 to have them in a memory suite, to have a lower ratio of clients to personal support workers, and to have the extra stimulating programs. So when we're looking at developing the plans, what sort of allotment is being put into not aging in place, but possibly aging in a retirement home before additional care is needed. The entry is space, preference, care, and do you have the associated budget to be able to afford retirement living? When we look at long-term care or assisted living, that's a medical model. So it means that you actually need more assistance. The criterion just to get in is you need to be assessed and have at least 2 activities of daily living that you are unable to perform. The criterion we may see may get stricter as time goes on. It is government funded. You have to apply through the ministry. It's medically focused. and advance applications are not permitted. Something I'm asked a lot is, well, can I apply now? So let's say, okay, I'm 56. I'm going to apply now. That way, when I need it, a bed's available. No, there's no applying in advance. It's applying when an assessment is done, when it's evaluated that you actually are eligible, and then you're put on a wait list. Right now in Ontario, the wait list for long-term care is around 48,000 people long. As we went into COVID, the thought was that the care lists would actually go down, the wait times would go down as a result of primarily the negative stigma that we saw within retirement living, especially long-term care, as a result of the lockdowns and the corresponding deaths as a result of COVID and comorbidities. But what actually happened is this: the actual wait list rose to the point where the average wait time now is anywhere between 6 months to 5 years, depending on where and which home. It is government subsidized, so it's co-funded by the government. So you, the client, pay a portion of it and the government pays the other half. A private room right now, as of July 2025, was $2,979. So when you do look at why also is the wait time for long-term care that much longer than a retirement home, look at what the budget difference is, right? That's a huge difference for a client. So the way it works is once you apply and you get onto a wait list, you can apply to at least 5 different homes. When a bed becomes available at one of those homes, you have 72 hours to accept the bed. If you do not accept the bed, you are taken off the wait list. You have to wait another 3 months before you can apply, unless something critical happens in the intervening time. No one is refused entry into long-term care based on you cannot pay. There's a means test, which is a yearly application. So once you get into long-term care and you find at $29.79 that's still unaffordable with CPP, OAS, and possibly GIS, you would apply. They would ask for your most recent notice of assessment to decide, do you get the discounted rate, and that has to be done yearly. Next slide, please. So something I always think about is the gaps in the healthcare system and who's providing the care. And we know, because we hear about it on the news, we hear about it anecdotally with friends and family, who's providing the care and how's it affecting our lives, basically. So right now, the current caregivers are providing about 75% of the in-home care that's valued at $97.1 billion, and that was 3 years ago. It's projected to reach $128 billion in value by 2035. So when we think about what would happen to our economy and people's budgets if the caregivers stopped caring. When surveys were done, 44% were caught off guard by the emotional impact, the lifestyle impact, the time demands. 36% didn't anticipate the effects on their job or their finances. And about 60% of caregivers are actually covering out of pocket for the care recipient, about $640 a month. So 2 things right there. When you think about decisions that are made by that sandwich generation on, am I going to be a caregiver, and suddenly getting a distress call from mom, dad, or whoever saying, I need care, I have cancer, I'm terminal, or dad's been diagnosed with dementia, it's not looking good, the decline's accelerating. When a snap decision's made of, okay, I'm going to quit my job to take care of mom or dad, whoever I need to, where in the plan is there a portion that takes into account emergency catastrophic decisions? Because taking time away from employment, it will affect the caregiver who's going to be left with less savings for their own care and retirement down the road. When we think about workplace, it's always important, I think, as soon as something like this starts to happen, that we also let our employers know of what's happening. That way there is some sort of accommodation in place for when we need to go to appointments to be a second set of eyes, a second set of ears, to be the Uber to help mom and dad pick up the prescriptions, all of those things. And I think when you have an open dialogue with your employer, it makes those sorts of allowances easier without the struggle of this or that. And I think part of what we have to look at when we're doing retirement planning for our clients is at a cost of $640 a month extra, what does $7,600 do to a sandwich generation's balance sheet or retirement plan when you're looking at saving for kids' secondary education, paying off the mortgage, and also saving for your own retirement? And time. All of us feel like there's never enough time. 38% of caregivers underestimated how much time it would require. Caregivers between the ages of 15 and 65 on average spend 20 hours a week. That's on top of their job or whatever else they're doing, caring for someone else. So when we think of that time commitment, and there's 24 hours a day, and you already have a full load, what is the actual impact of that time on tipping the scales of anybody's life, really? The other one that on the other side that I found really interesting was prospective caregivers. So people who are not doing the job yet. The Ontario Caregiver Organization did a survey, and of the number, and forgive me, I'm actually forgetting what the sample pool was, but it was in the millions, because 2.7 million of those people anticipated that they're going to have a caregiving responsibility, but they've actually said, no, I'm not going to do it because of lack of confidence, physically, mentally, or financially unable to. And always the assumption that the healthcare system is going to provide all the care that's necessary. We know that there are gaps in the healthcare system, and that is not true. That will not happen. The healthcare system is not set up to provide everything that's necessary. So when we have family conversations, family meetings, as difficult as it is, I think it's really important to actually have that conversation of to your son, to your daughter, to whoever's in that support group, your anticipated support group. Do you actually want to do it? Can you actually do it? Because if the answer is no, you need time as a care recipient to have that retirement plan reviewed and reallocate resources to the care part of that plan. 36% of prospective caregivers lack confidence in affording the caregiving costs, and fewer are willing to go into debt than current caregivers. So current caregivers in the same study will do a HELOC, will do a line of credit, will borrow from family, will take out of their personal savings, will remortgage their house to help take care of their loved one. The caregivers of the future said, no, we are not going to do that. We've already decided that we are not going to be a caregiver. Do their parents know? Do the people who anticipate them to take care, do they know? We know there's planning gaps. Over half haven't started planning or budgeting, despite 94% recognizing its importance. And 50% of people actually avoid the conversations because they find it difficult and the care recipient find it difficult. But the end result, and this is the brass tacks of reality, how much more comfortable will that conversation be if you're in the ICU, if you're in the doctor's office and you're in emerge? So it's better to have the conversation now while people can think through it and plan ahead than suddenly discover, hey, my plan's falling apart now. Next slide.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Neela. Those are really, really great insights, and important to look back on the impacts with things changing so quickly and the residual impacts of the pandemic as well still playing out. Given that information, what do you think the key areas are of retirement planning where most people are affected by the rising healthcare costs, especially given the sharing of family responsibilities?
Mm-hmm. We can go to the next slide. I think, so, here obviously we know that healthcare is rising. We know that healthcare inflation actually has risen faster than regular inflation. And that was before inflation was a thing. I mean, a flat of bacon is still $8.99 at Loblaws. So when I think of stuff like that, healthcare has been constantly rising. It is outpacing general inflation. So I think when we look at retirement planning, what we need to do, starting in between the sandwich generation, because the most common question ends up being, when should I start planning? And I think it's as a sandwich generation, and we know that there's going to be there's a downwards responsibility to taking care of our young family, and an upwards responsibility taking care of parents. I think it would be, one, having that conversation with your advisor or your financial planner about, you think you're going to be a caregiver. How would it impact your retirement plan if you had to stop or take time out of your working world to take care of someone? But I think more importantly, that first conversation, you have to have that with whoever the person is, to let them know that you are in a position to do this because you maybe have a flexible job, you can afford to take the time off, there's no other competing interests. Because if you feel you can't, you're catching somebody by surprise who unfortunately is making an assumption that you're going to be their caregiver. And reversed, if you're a parent or an older person who are thinking your kid's going to be part of that plan, it's important to let them know what your thought process is. I mean, if we can do the planning to go on a trip to buy a car, we can do the planning to have these conversations. And it doesn't have to be all at once, but I think it's necessary to start it, because for an older person, if they are not going to provide the care, and care is around, $30 to $70 an hour, and let's call it 30, what does 3 hours a day, $36,500 a year do to your retirement plan if you need escalating care and there's a 6-month to 5-year wait list to get into long-term care? What does that gap plan look like? So I think that definitely has to be a part of retirement planning. And I would say if I looked at order of operations, I would also be before maybe legacy planning, before, we talk about the exciting stuff like bequeathing money to our children, charities, and all sorts of other stuff. It's making sure we have the money for self-sufficiency, and then go on to the next step. Next slide, please. So when we look at rising healthcare costs and the gaps in the system, we know that healthcare costs are rising both out of pocket, because OHIP, if we're in Ontario, government plans are covering less and less prescription drugs. We know that in-home care, the cost is escalating. And we also know that there's a shortage of PSWs, both in the healthcare system, so hospitals and long-term care facilities, as well as for home care. And we're seeing a movement more into the healthcare system because the pay is better than when we talk about in-home care. So what do we know about supply and demand? If the demand is like this and supply is like this, what happens to costs? This. Family responsibilities. We're seeing more and more families being mobile, right? We're no longer the homesteading communities of the past. So if you were thinking my child or whoever is going to take care of me, and they get married and move away, they take a job in another province, they're in the same province, but they move 4 hours away from you. What is your expectation, and how have you addressed that as far as your long-term, your retirement plan and long-term care plan goes? We're looking at more and more adult children having to financially support their parents, the baby boomer parents. If that's diverting retirement income from a sandwich generation, an adult child, how does that affect their trajectory into retirement, especially as we know costs are going to go up? When we look at just planning itself, I think there has to be, one, a healthcare component. There has to be taken into account healthcare inflation. I think we need to be able to say the client had conversations with the son, the daughter, the grandchildren, whoever it is, so that the plan is being created in that retirement plan. And I think the plan has to be flexible. So, you know, the idea of, well, what will it cost? What's the disease? What's the trajectory of the disease? How debilitating can it be? How long will it last? So these are all undeterminants. So I think the plans that we create have to be really flexible for financial healthcare shocks. Next slide. So when we look at where are the public resources going as far as policy goes and public systems, a Canadian living to the age of 85 will incur along the way about $500,000 in medical expenses if you were to add up the stuff OHIP pays. And that's most of it incurred past the age of 65. So when we look at a chart, it would be a disproportionate amount. So sort of from here to here is around 49, then it slightly goes up into 50, and then 50 to 60, and then 65 past, it really accelerates. We know that there's budget pressures. Nearly half of the seniors account for healthcare being spent, despite representing an equal portion right now of 15-year-olds and 65 and older year olds. By age 90, one senior generates the same medical demand of 4 younger adults. So when we think that the labor pool is constricting, how does that affect government funding, and how does that affect healthcare policy? Millennials and Gen Zs are contributing more through taxes to support the healthcare system right now, using less dollars than the senior population. Next slide, please. So for the first time in history, and this was really publicized approaching this and into now, right now we have seniors on one side and 16-year-olds, actually 15 and onwards. So we're looking at a sort of a barbell with very heavy weights on either side. I think this is going to be a challenge going forward for multiple generations. We know that it's impacting work and finances. Caregivers often have to reduce their work hours, take a leave of absence, leave the workforce, and ultimately that lowers their lifetime savings. 61% reported work-related strain. Caregiving responsibilities can also end up delaying somebody's retirement. So if you created this plan that you're going to retire at 62 or 65, and then suddenly, let's say you're 58, and at 58 you have to take care of mom or dad who's 88. What happens then to that portion of the plan? And how are how is the plan being reevaluated? Caregivers themselves report higher levels of stress, anxiety, and burnout. 25% of senior caregivers report their own health suffers. We're actually in a paradigm right now where within a senior couple or partnership, somebody who's unwell is actually taking care of someone who's even more unwell. 65% of multi-generational households provide care. And when we look at retirement plans, we know that they have to include now caregiving costs, potential time out of the workforce. From a policy perspective, we know that more has to be done to support caregivers in general, and we need more robust financial tools that can actually take into account healthcare as part of the retirement plan. Next slide, please. So when we talk about how do we start these conversations, which are often sticky, uncomfortable conversations, I think we need to look at value-based starters, financial starters, and family and legacy starters. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go through them since they're here right now, but I think we really need to leave it as open-ended questions, and questions where we're looking at an answer of yes. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you've worked so hard all your life to save and put away savings for your goals. Do you think we could set aside a minute just to talk about a longevity risk? Mr. and Mrs. Joe, do you think your kids are kept up at night by wondering what their part is in your caregiving plan? Have you had a conversation with them? So I think it's just expressing it. And even as ourselves, what would you be most afraid of if you got a call from your parent? What are you most afraid of and what are you least prepared for? And I think start those conversations that way so that it has that authenticity that we can actually talk from experience of fears and experience. Next slide, please. So I think key takeaways and calls to action is retirement planning has to evolve to the current healthcare gap. We know that inflation will only continue to rise. It is a silent risk. Caregiving itself on both sides, whether you're taking care of a younger family or a older person, it alters your financial trajectory. And I think possibly caregiving of a senior actually alters it a bit more. Families tend to be a bit more planned, whereas getting that phone call that dad needs care is usually unexpected, or it's gradual to unexpected. And I think we have to look and try to support policy changes. That way people aren't left unsupported in a caregiving role without the support they need, because what happens, again, back to that question, what happens if they say, no, I'm not going to do it? Next slide. Robert.
That was really great, Neela. Thanks for sharing such a comprehensive view of how retirement planning is evolving for those retiring and for advisors. Especially those key takeaways are really valuable. I do want to jump to Rob. Rob, can you share more on how those who are planning for retirement can optimize their income through effective tax planning to contribute to better funding, as Neela was mentioning, with the rising healthcare costs and things like that?
Yes, thank you, Radia. So I wanted to just kick off with tax planning, why it's essential. Tax is not a myth. It's just a little bit complicated, or more complicated than it needs to be. Some of the things I want to cover include, as you see the points on there, inflation, we have seen that slow down a bit as opposed to the last 2 years and things. But the essential expenses remain high. Like, we're not seeing the prices go down for like groceries or services and things. And Neela does mention earlier about healthcare costs. It does go up higher than the inflation or the CPI, central bank's target, the 2%. That's certainly something to watch out for. In terms of market volatility and how that will impact a retiree, and why tax planning is essential, is people are going to spend similar amount, may spend more when market's doing well, but when you experience a market correction and things, how do you create enough cash buffer so that your monthly spending is similar, so you're not drawing out more than you need and things. Another one I want to point out is for certain folks in the larger, let's call it metropolitan area, their home equity is a large value of their net worth, but that doesn't necessarily mean they can use up or use some or all that value in the home. It's got some value, but how do you tap into that? And certainly, as both of the panelists mentioned earlier, in that the cost of what somebody just recently retired, then the healthcare cost may or may not surface as something to keep on top of their mind, that it could be an extra cost. One things I sometimes mention to client is, well, your cost is not really going down. When you don't really travel, that same amount of cost, if not more, that's going to medical care. Potentially, just to bring the awareness level up. The last point I wanted to keep everybody in mind is not really how much you make for retiree. They receive amount of funding, pre-tax income, or withholdings already done as source. It's really about how much you're spending or how much you plan to spend. Next slide, please. So some of the things it's helpful for advisors to let clients know is, well, if they've been really good and put away money in RSP, you're gonna do withdrawal as RIF or RSP withdrawals. That's 100% taxable because it was growing and it's continuing to grow on pre-tax basis. So the entire amount, once you pull it off on the account, is 100% taxable. OAS, OH Security does have a clawback. They call it recovery tax mechanism, and it starts around a little over 90,000. So that's something that's very important for the affluent retiree group to be just aware. There is another thing with the way how our tax system works is marginal tax rates is you make the next dollar that's taxable, what percentage of it is getting taxed at. So for a retiree, they don't really start at, say, the $15,000 exempt amount because you have your OAS, you have your CPP, you have some of your work pension potentially. Those are the taxable or not. Those are the amount that comes into your bank account on a regular basis before you tap into your other sources, such as the RSP. So you're already starting at a base level of tax rate for the next dollar you're going to use for retirement. The cross-border, I just be mindful of the time. I'll just go light, go very, very high level. If any client does have any cross-border considerations and things, it just complicated matters. So as an advisor, what would be helpful is you understand the family a bit more. You kind of know where each family member came from and where the younger family members might be, then you start to consider and go, okay, well, are there any cross-border consideration that may impact this retirement couple you're looking at? For example, the kids are not really in the close proximity, then they're not really around to provide that time for the care to pick up prescription drugs for mom and dad, like in Nila's case, because the kids are not even in the same city, then that's different kind of consideration altogether. Certainly in our country, we file taxes not the way how the US does it, but if for single taxpayer versus a couple file jointly, there's just going to be a fewer opportunity to do income splitting where allowed. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Robert. Those are some great takeaways and considerations. How would you say that retirees can proactively prepare and use the practical tax strategies to maximize their after-tax income and secure their financial future?
Great. So I got some points here to share. I won't read them. We can read them. You have copy of the slides later, so I'll just speak to some of them. Certainly, where the cash flow allows, TFSA is very powerful. They're flexible. The growth is tax-free. The withdrawal is tax-free. It doesn't impact retirees' after-tax income. So whenever there's opportunity, certainly consider to maximize if can. Of course, every couple, every household will have different situation you want to look at. You don't want to use it like what we did in 2010 as a regular savings account of drawing and depositing multiple times within the same year. I think we're past that. We're 15, 16 years out from having TFSA. Most of us don't do that, or all of us don't do that anymore. In terms of sequence of withdrawing, there's two things to keep in mind. One is it's not always, so this is what I wrote is might be like a first rule of thumb, but it's not the golden rule. What you want to strategize around is the taking advantage of the marginal tax rate. If you wanted to withdraw a little bit more RSP out this year before going to the next tax rate, tax bracket, would that make more sense than use up the more of the non-registered account to not increase the taxes that you pay? So there could be a balancing act that you do. The other thing is asset location strategy of income-heavy investments. So produces interest income or dividend income, you may want to have that in the RSP versus in a taxable account, whereas a taxable account, capital gain or Canadian dividend would be more advantage from a tax point of view. Now, in terms of pension income splitting, that's allowed under RIF, and there you can split up to 50%. When you do that, it's quite powerful if the two individuals are in different marginal tax rates. The pension income tax credit will be available once starting at age 65. So a common practice to consider is to convert a small amount of RSP into a RIF so that you withdraw $2,000 a year to take advantage of some of that tax credit. But keep in mind, the 15% base non-refundable tax credit is reduced to 14% effective July this year. So for this year's tax filing, so 2025 coming up in a few months, is 14.5%, and moving forward, starting 2026, it would be 14% instead of the 15% that we have seen for the last number of years. I wrote harvesting, investment gain and loss and all that. So that is a popular strategy to look at towards the end of the year, like now, some call it tax loss harvesting. Essentially is to look at a gain or loss today in the taxable investment portfolio and see if you can take opportunity to increase or decrease the gain or loss. How that will have an impact on your overall tax for the year. Next slide, please. So how can we really effectively plan for the cost? So one of the top things to keep in mind is doing some sort of financial planning or doing some sort of financial plan to some level to anticipate what that cost might be. So there are the renovation costs or equipment costs that our panelists mentioned earlier in terms of just knowing where those costs are going to come from. How that's important is because we look at the timing of those costs and the amount of those costs, then what we're really looking at is after tax. So then you got to think about, okay, where's that money going to come from? Which sort of account are we going to draw that? Some of that would have more higher amount of tax implications and things. I wanted to highlight on the third point, a medical expense tax credit. So it's important to note that there is a minimum threshold before those amounts can become tax credits. So it's typically 3% of your net income. Or last year, the amount is $27.59. So the point is that you may claim the credit depending on which spouse. If one of them has a lower net income for whatever reason of that 3%, then does it make sense to claim on one over the other? The other thing to keep in mind is it's on a off-calendar based continuum. So for example, you don't necessarily have to claim a full year from January 1st to December 31st of 2025 in the next filing. As long as the same expense or the period has not been used in the past, you can shift on the 365 days where you're going to claim. So there is some planning opportunity to think about, to work with client's accountant in terms of what period of that 365 days you want to use, depending on when the medical expense took place. Next slide, please. So what can you or us as advisors do? You want to stress test some scenario and say, okay, when the clients said they're going to spend how much, and you're sending them regular drawing when they're retiree for how much amount, you want to also consider the buffer. So when are some of the liquidity events that might happen? Say they may move, say they wanted to gift some amount to family members or some parties they would like to. When will that large expenses come on? It could be medical bill as well. So you wanted to either have a buffer or have a lamppost to say, okay, when are those expenses that might come up? does that mean your cash buffer, cash reserve within the investment portfolio wanted to be a bit higher just in preparation of it so that you're less sensitive to the market correction? Now, there's another one I want to point out in the fourth point in terms of policy changes, market shocks. Just keep in mind, in 2022, the stock market and the bond market both didn't do that well, just as a reference point for us to remember. So it's important to keep a buffer amount just in those days. In terms of policy changes, something interesting came out 2 days ago with the 2025 budget, in that it's proposed to have a amount to cover disability tax credit certification costs. And it's $150 payment up to about $2,400 a year. So that's a welcome change for welcome potential change that's going to come up as part of the Canada Disability Benefit. So things like those will be helpful as clients get older, or there is a certain health condition in the family, just to be able to watch out to take advantage of what's available. Next slide.
Thanks so much, Robert. That was really insightful. We have run out of time, so I'm not sure we have enough time for the Q&A, but we did get some great questions, and I think what we can do is create another session out of them. So we look forward to welcoming you back, maybe for another webinar that expands on some of the items that you've talked about today. As I said, this was an incredibly informative session and a really important milestone that I think all of us need to be thinking about, whether it's from a personal perspective or from an advisor perspective. Thank you, everyone who attended. There will be a replay of this webinar available in the coming days. If you have any additional questions for us, you can reach out to us at support.csi.ca. Given that it's Financial Literacy Month, we will be having another event on November 13th about the Great Wealth Transfer, and you can register for that event on our website at csi.ca. Thanks again, Neela and Christina and Robert, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.